and on the corner of 14th and Peachtree, nestled between a smoothie bar and a luxury finance firm, sat a sleek glass-walled bank, newly renovated, air-conditioned, polished like pride. That's where he walked in, slacks pressed, button-up clean, brown skin smooth, hair lined sharp like he meant business, but didn't need to say it. His name, Marcus D. Holloway. But nobody in that lobby asked, because the moment he opened the door, the atmosphere shifted. You could almost feel it through the tinted glass. A white man at the teller window paused mid-sentence and gave a glance. A middle-aged woman near the loan desk clutched her purse a little tighter. And behind the counter, the assistant manager's lips curled not into a smile, but something colder. Familiar. Tighter. Marcus walked up to the receptionist, gave a nod. "Good morning. I'd like to open a business checking account," he said. Voice deep, calm, respectful. The receptionist didn't meet his eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I checked online. Says walk-ins are welcome." She let out a breath through her nose. She clicked a few times, then turned her head toward a man leaning on the far counter clipboard, in hand sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a smirk that said he thought he knew exactly what kind of man had just walked in. That man's name, Preston Vaughn, assistant branch manager and part-time gatekeeper of other people's worth. Preston approached Marcus like he was about to explain the rules of a game he didn't believe Marcus was qualified to play. "Can I help you?" he asked, eyes scanning Marcus's clothes. "Yeah, I'd like to open a business account for my firm." "Uh-huh. And what kind of business is it?" The tone wasn't curious. It was condescending, measured. Marcus didn't flinch. Financial consulting. Preston's brow lifted. Really, Marcus didn't smile. "Yes." "Okay. Well," Preston said, looking around the lobby as if searching for someone to save him from this interaction. "We typically require a pre-approval for business accounts of that nature." "That's not what your website says," Preston chuckled lightly, mocking, not amused. "Our website isn't always up to date." Silence stretched. Tension sat heavy in the air. Another teller glanced up from her station. You could tell she saw what was happening but said nothing, like this wasn't her first time watching injustice disguised as policy. Marcus kept his tone level. "All right. What documents do you need to proceed?" "Well," Preston drawled, flipping through his clipboard theatrically. "We need your Articles of Incorporation business license, EIN letter, at least 6 months of bank statements, a credit report, and… Yeah, we'll also need a letter of recommendation from a CPA or legal representative." Marcus blinked. A letter of recommendation, Preston smiled, this time fully. "Just policy." It wasn't policy. Anyone in finance could see that. It was obstruction dressed up as procedure, and it wasn't subtle. A young white man in a hoodie and sneakers walked in 5 minutes later. Said he wanted to open an account for his dog walking app. Preston greeted him with a laugh, a pat on the back, and led him to a desk. 10 minutes later, they were shaking hands. "Done deal." Marcus watched, said nothing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folder, handed it to Preston without a word. Inside, every single document requested neatly labeled, bound, verified. Preston flipped through it, slowly, looking for a reason to say no. Eventually, he slapped the folder closed and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but unfortunately, I don't think this account is a good fit for our institution." Just like that. No reason. No cause. Just the quiet violence of dismissal. Marcus stared at him, eyes steady, expression unreadable. And then he smiled. Not wide, not loud, just a small, knowing curve. The kind of smile that says, "You really don't know who I am?" Do you? Preston felt it. The shift. The unspoken threat, not of violence, but of consequence. Marcus picked up his folder. "Thank you for your time," he said. Voice smooth like polished marble. He turned, walked past the line of customers, many of whom had gone silent, watching, sensing something was wrong, but not quite understanding what. He pushed the door open and stepped back into the sunlight. But he didn't walk far. Just next door, literally, to the towering glass building labeled Holloway and Ward Financial Group. Preston watched through the window, face frozen, as Marcus entered. The building was greeted by a team of assistants and escorted into a private elevator, keycard access only. 5 minutes later, the windows of that firm glowed as the boardroom lights flicked on. 15 minutes later, the regional director of the very bank Preston worked for received a phone call. And 20 minutes after that, security walked into the branch. Straight to Preston, the man who had smirked at a customer because of the color of his skin. Mr. Vaughn, the head of security, said loud enough for the lobby to hear, "You need to come with us. No explanation, no defense, just eyes. Watching, judging, whispering. Because sometimes karma walks in wearing slacks and a calm smile, and sometimes justice doesn't need to shout." The silence in the bank lobby after Preston was escorted out was loud. People didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. It was like someone had unplugged the room from its own rhythm. The only sound was the soft hiss of the automatic doors closing behind the security team. Back inside Holloway and Ward Financial Group, the mood was different, efficient, focused, controlled. Marcus stood at the head of a dark walnut boardroom table, reviewing a printed stack of compliance records. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the room like a movie set, looking out over the very building that had just denied him. He wasn't angry. He was calculating. See, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Not to Marcus. Not to people who looked like him. But this time it hit different. This time it was personal. Because Preston hadn't just insulted a man, he insulted a movement. Every decision Marcus made that morning, what he wore, what time he arrived, even which building he walked into first, had been intentional. Because Marcus Holloway didn't just build a financial firm, he built a statement. His company specialized in empowering Black entrepreneurs to gain access to capital, build intergenerational wealth, and break out of systems designed to keep them out. He'd built relationships with every major institution on that block, including the bank that had just rejected him. And yet, that morning, none of it mattered. Not his success, not his credentials, not the millions in assets under his management. The only thing they saw when he walked in was a black man who didn't look the part. So now it was time to flip the script. Inside the bank, whispers started spreading. One teller leaned in toward her coworker. "That guy, he owns the building next door." Another replied, "No way." Preston just kicked out a CEO. People started pulling out their phones, searching, confirming, eyes widening. Meanwhile, back in Marcus's office, he sent a single email. Not to the branch, not to Preston, but directly to Claire Worthington, Regional Vice President of Retail Banking Operations. Subject line, Incident, Branch 043, Immediate Action Required. Attached video footage of the encounter time-stamped. A scanned copy of the exact documents Preston claimed weren't enough. And a brief note. Discrimination is not just unethical, it's expensive. It took less than 30 minutes for Claire to respond. "Mr. Holloway, please accept my sincerest apologies. I will be personally overseeing an internal investigation. May I schedule a meeting with you this afternoon to discuss next steps?" Marcus didn't reply right away. Instead, he stood at his office window, looking down. The same bank, the same door, same glass. But now the roles were shifting, because down on the sidewalk a new scene had begun unfolding. News vans were pulling up. Reporters in heels and camera-ready smiles stepped out, microphones in hand. Something was brewing, and it wasn't just about a bank account anymore. Preston, meanwhile, was seated inside a back room, red-faced, fidgeting, trying to explain his misunderstanding to two internal auditors who didn't even bother to hide their skepticism. It's policy, he kept repeating. We have to screen for fraud. One of the auditors, an older black woman named Sheila, didn't even blink. Funny, she said. We reviewed 6 business account applications opened this week. None of them were asked for a CPA letter. He tried to pivot. I didn't recognize the name. Sheila pulled out her iPad, tapped it, and turned it toward him. Marcus's LinkedIn profile. Forbes, 40 under 40. CNBC panel footage. CEO of a financial group that had helped over 400 minority-owned startups get funding in the past 5 years. Maybe she said coolly, you weren't trying to recognize him. Preston went pale. Back on the street, something even more powerful was beginning. The people were starting to talk. Videos of Marcus being dismissed began circulating online. Someone had caught it on a smartphone. The title, Black CEO Denied at Local Bank. Then this happened. It went viral before lunch. The comments exploded. Happens every day. Glad someone finally got caught. They didn't know they were messing with the plug. This is why we build our own institutions. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a symbol, a moment that pierced the veil. By early afternoon, Marcus stepped out of his building, head held high, no entourage, no fanfare, and walked right back into the same bank. Everyone noticed. A woman near the counter whispered, "That's him." The new branch manager, brought in temporarily after Preston's sudden leave of absence, stood nervously by the door. "Mr. Holloway," he said, holding out a hand. "Welcome back. We're honored to have you. Everything is ready." Marcus took the hand, shook it firmly, then walked past him. As he crossed the lobby, every eye followed. Some curious, some ashamed, some deeply inspired. He reached the desk, sat down, and calmly began filling out his business account forms. No more requirements, no more excuses, just results. As he signed the final document, a young black woman approached quietly. A teller, mid-20s, eyes glassy with emotion. "Sir," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, thank you for not walking away." Marcus looked up at her, expression serious. "I didn't build all this just to walk away when it got hard." She nodded, understood, walked back to her post with a renewed sense of pride. And that's when the cameras outside started flashing. Marcus exited the building once again, this time through the front door, flanked by press and photographers. He didn't grandstand, didn't pose, just turned toward the crowd and said, "This isn't just about me. It's about what we're still up against, every day, even when we've made it. This is why we don't stop." The crowd applauded, the moment sealed. But what most didn't know was that the biggest twist was still to come. Because Marcus hadn't just exposed one man's prejudice, he was about to expose the system behind it. And in part 3, that system's walls were about to crack. 2 days later, the headlines still hadn't cooled down. Black CEO denied service by bank, then reveals he owns the company next door. Racism in a suit financial institution, under fire after viral incident. This is why representation matters. The footage had spread like wildfire. Cable news, Twitter, TikTok, even LinkedIn, where executives whispered in threads with coded words like unconscious bias and employee training opportunities. But underneath all the corporate speak, the truth rang loud and clear. They messed with the wrong man. Marcus Holloway didn't go on a media tour. He didn't need to. The receipts were doing all the talking. But the fallout was only just beginning. Behind the scenes, the board of directors at the bank chain had entered crisis mode. Shareholders were calling. Black employees were leaking internal memos. Customers were closing accounts. Fast. And then came the final blow. Marcus released a public letter. Not a rant, not a vengeance piece, a dignified razor-sharp essay titled, "What Dignity Costs in Corporate America." He detailed the incident, but more than that, he laid out numbers, stats, case studies. The hard truth about systemic discrimination in financial institutions. How black entrepreneurs are denied loans at nearly double the rate of white applicants. How business legitimacy is still judged by the color of a man's skin before the content of his portfolio. He ended the piece with a simple, bone-chilling sentence. I didn't ask for special treatment. I asked for equal treatment. And I walked in prepared just like they told me to. But when I did, I was still seen as a threat. Now I ask, what does a black man have to wear, build, or own to be treated like a human being? The article went viral, more viral than the video, because it wasn't just Marcus's story anymore. It was their story, every black professional who'd been questioned in their own office building, every black student who was assumed to be lost on campus, every black father mistaken for the chauffeur at his kid's private school. Suddenly, Marcus Holloway became a symbol. But the real twist that came during the live press conference held by the bank's corporate HQ that Friday. Cameras flashed, reporters buzzed, and up walked the bank's CEO, a white man in his early 60s, visibly uncomfortable, visibly rehearsed. "We would like to deeply apologize to Mr. Holloway," he began. "This does not reflect our values." But halfway through his statement, he was interrupted. Because walking into that room unannounced, wearing a deep charcoal suit and a face carved from calm confidence, came Marcus. Every head turned. Every mic swung toward him. He didn't take the podium. He didn't need to. He handed a folder to the CEO, shook his hand, and said into the mic, "This is a proposal for a partnership. Not for me, for the hundreds of black-owned businesses that deserve access to capital and respect. You can either sign it or keep apologizing." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just bold. It was strategic. Marcus had come not just to collect justice, but to change the system. Later that evening, an exclusive segment aired on national television, an interview with Marcus filmed inside his firm. The anchor leaned forward curious. "Marcus, why didn't you just move on? Take your business elsewhere?" Marcus didn't blink, because that's what they expect us to do. Walk away. Quietly. But I wasn't raised to shrink in the face of disrespect. My grandfather marched in Selma. My father taught me never to sit down when it's time to stand up. So I stood. He paused, but I also understood something else they weren't ready for, who I really was. The camera zoomed in. He opened a black leather binder on the table beside him. Inside a list of institutional partnerships, financial data letters of support from Fortune 500 executives, and one particularly damning report, an internal audit, showing a pattern of racial profiling at over a dozen branches. The twist was deeper than a single incident. This wasn't just about Preston. It was a culture, and Marcus had come with evidence. The bank's legal team scrambled. Public pressure mounted. By Monday morning, the bank's parent company released a statement, a multi-million-dollar fund for black-owned business support. Mandatory bias training across all branches, a restructuring of management, and Preston terminated. Publicly. No severance. Because when you build power with integrity, you don't need revenge. You let the truth do the cutting. As the week closed, a new mural began appearing downtown. Spray painted with purpose on the side of an old brick wall. In bold white letters, "Dignity isn't granted, it's demanded." And underneath in silhouette, Marcus Holloway, briefcase in hand, walking forward, head high. By the following month, the bank was no longer trying to hide. They were now begging to be seen on the right side of history. Billboards went up across the city. "We hear you. We stand with you." Diversity panels were hosted. Community meetings live-streamed. Executives took selfies with black entrepreneurs they once ignored. But for many, it was too late, because the public didn't forget. And neither did Marcus. He didn't gloat. He didn't post cryptic tweets. He didn't ride the wave for fame. He got back to work, because Marcus Holloway wasn't chasing headlines. He was building a future, and now he had the leverage to do it faster. With every passing week, more business owners reached out to Holloway and Ward. Not just black founders, but Asian Latino immigrant entrepreneurs, women who'd been dismissed for being too young or too ambitious. They saw themselves in Marcus, in his calm, in his refusal to shrink, and the firm grew. By the end of the quarter, they had opened 2 new satellite offices, both in neighborhoods historically underbanked and overlooked. But justice, real justice, it came in a different form. It came quietly. Preston, the former assistant branch manager, was seen once at a coffee shop, head-down suit, gone muttering into a phone. He was blacklisted from 3 other regional banks after internal memos warned of liability risks. Turns out prejudice doesn't just cost dignity, it costs careers. And Marcus. He didn't say a word about him again, because Preston wasn't the point. The system was. And systems don't change with shouting. They change with strategy, with evidence, with dignity that refuses to bow. In a closing keynote at the National Black Wealth Conference, Marcus stood on stage, a quiet spotlight, casting his silhouette across the audience of over 2,000 Elorn. He took a long pause before speaking. No notes, just his voice. There's a moment every black man remembers, a moment when the world doesn't see your name, your work, your contribution, just your skin. And in that moment, you have 2 choices: become what they expect, or redefine the entire game. He paced slowly. I didn't fight to open a bank account. I fought to open a door. For every entrepreneur who's ever been told they're too loud, too young, too poor, too black to be taken seriously. The audience leaned in. Never forget, dignity is not given, it is claimed. And justice, he paused, eyes scanning the room. Justice is not about punishment. It's about restoration, reparation, recognition. He stepped back. This is your time. Stand up, speak up, and don't ever apologize for who you are. The applause shook the room. Not wild, not chaotic, but sustained, intentional, like the rhythm of a people finally hearing their own story, told with grace, not bitterness. And outside that conference hall in cities across the country, the ripple effect had already begun. Banks reevaluated their policies. Hiring committees changed their vetting systems. Customers started asking the right questions. Because one man stood firm. Because one man refused to walk out quietly. Final scene. A young black teen sits at a library table, hoodie on, notebook open, laptop glowing. He clicks play on Marcus's keynote. Listens, eyes focused. Silent. And then he starts typing. A business plan. Because that's how legacies begin, not with a victory lap, but with the next generation picking up the pen.